there's one that I think you need to make a commitment to more than the other. And then I think there's also one that didn't play as well last year as he had the previous 2 years, right? So when you factor those two things in, I think the pecking order is probably Wilson first and then Sauce. In an ideal world, I think both happen. I would say Garrett getting extended, in my mind, is probably somewhere around 80% this offseason, and Sauce is probably closer to 50%. I would hope that, again, that they both do, but like, it's going to come down to how they can structure these things out, right? Muji is trying to play down the middle of fixing what he inherited and walked into, and also setting the team up for future success. And like, in a couple years, the Jets cap is in a really, really good place. Right now, it's not great. It's in the bottom third of the league, I think. I think they have something like 23 million in space, 23 million in change, and I think it costs something like 6 to sign the rookies. So effectively, that's 17 before any restructures. Now, obviously, there's going to be restructures. There's going to be changes to that number. But when you look at the cornerback market and the wide receiver market and what's going to command, the top 5 paid corners right now, if you're just thinking from like a franchise tag number, like neighborhood, where's it going to be at, right? Denzel Ward, Marlon Humphrey, Marshawn Lattimore, Trevon Diggs, and Patrick Surtain, which I think is probably the best comp we could find in terms of age, contract length, value, all that stuff. But they all kind of hover around that 20 million mark. So if you're looking to pay a guy that definitely considers himself to be a top 5 corner in the league, and I would say that probably most educated people would say he's probably top 10 at worst, right? You're looking at 20 million a year, and you're probably looking at 4 to 6 years on that number. And so that's 20 right there. And then on wide receiver side, the 5 highest paid are Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra, and Brandon Ayuk. I think Amon-Ra is probably the best example we can grab there by age. You could say CeeDee too, but I would say that CeeDee Lamb is probably in that tier. That's like Garrett Wilson is just scratching at the bottom of, but maybe has not had that year touchdown-wise yet that puts him there, with CeeDee and Justin Jefferson and Devontae Adams and like kind of like the premier names. I would say Garrett Wilson's good enough. He's just not there yet. And those contracts are all bigger, right? Their total value of 140 million. They're averaging out around 36 million a year. And so that one's tougher to get done, which I think, again, kind of puts me back at the place where we started at the beginning, which is, if I had to pick one, I think you're probably doing the bigger money one first with the guy that you probably trust a little more at this moment in time. And so when you look at the comparable contracts that are out there, I think obviously Devontae Adams is going to come off the books, so that changes our number a little bit. And I think it's possible that with the right massaging, they can get both of these things done. I just think it's going to be Wilson before Sauce.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only way Sauce gets done first is if the Garrett Wilson like contract number, if they're in like, if Garrett wants to be paid, top 3 wide receiver money, and we're sort of using the top 5 benchmark, you could end up with like a couple $1 million difference, and that could stall some things. But I do think both deals will likely get done. I would lean, if I had to pick one, I would say get Garrett Wilson done. And I think, this is an offseason, especially with the uncertainty going into quarterback, especially with all the smoke going around about, the player wanting out potentially. Like, I think Garrett is the guy you're less willing to lose. And so getting that team control done now, when there is like a breath of momentum behind the organization and a change in the guard, where we can say, this is a new regime, we want to commit to you, here's a shit ton of money. That, I think, is probably the most important move of this offseason for the Jets, and making sure that we have that team control. So even if, the offense doesn't hit the ground running, so to speak, right under this new regime, you still have your main offensive weapon locked up for the next 5 years. So I think the Garrett deal is by far the most important piece of this offseason. I think it will get done. I think, and maybe it's a factor of we got to move Devontae before we can get it done. I don't necessarily think that'll be the case, but there is a way with both of these players that, like, everyone, obviously the cap went up $50 million in the last 2 years. There's a new TV rights deal that's coming down the pipe in 2029, I think. So, like, when you're structuring these deals, you can bank a lot of that in of like, this is the Jalen Hurts contract thing where he's making 95 million against the cap in 2029. Like, that number will never be reached, and it won't even be a problem because they'll have so much flexibility with this new TV rights deal. So this is the offseason, especially with these two, for like future planning and saying, we know the cap is just going to continue to rise. Let's push our cap strength like down the line so that 2029 would give us problems, knowing that there's going to be a massive spike and we won't ever have to deal with that. Besides,
planning on that relief is huge for sure. And I do want to correct one thing I said, that I made the comparison to Amon-Ra's contract and the potential Garrett contract, and then I said 36 million. I meant that the top three, as you said, make 36, 35, 34, right? And then there's a drop off, and there's a whole second group that are all sitting at 30 million. And so you got to figure Garrett is going to say, I'm somewhere between that top group and that 30 million group. So that's probably like a little short of that top end, but somewhere up there for sure.
Yeah. Are there any players besides these two that you think the Jets would look to extend this offseason? Like, obviously Breece is coming off not necessarily his best year, and running back contracts are, a whole different beast. And Jermaine is obviously coming off an injury. Do you see any scenario besides Garrett and Sauce where we extend some of our own guys this offseason?
No, not the big money stuff. I mean, I think Quincy Williams has made it known that he would like an amended contract, but also like, his people are gone, right? Like the people that kind of helped him along in his career are not here anymore. So I'm not sure the current administration sees it that way. Now, will they maybe figure something out because he has been an All-Pro? Probably, but it's not a guarantee that like they are actively looking to extend Quincy Williams on a richer deal. And kind of like you laid it out, has anybody else really earned it, right? You look kind of up and down this roster, and like, you can't say AVT has earned an extension. You can't say Jermaine has based upon the injury. You can't say Breece has because of the positional value. So like, you kind of look all around and you're like, there's really only two guys that are eligible for like marquee extensions. Now, will they try to rework some people? I mean, no, I don't know. I don't really see it happening with anybody else.
No,
Carter's already done.
Yeah, Quincy's a great call out, and Carter already being done, I think probably does help out. Although it maybe complicates some things with Sauce because it's a lot of investment into one position group. But I think they're both worth it. But yeah, I think Quincy's a great call out. I think the new regime, it'll be interesting to see, how they value him in their new defense and in this scheme. But you can't knock the guy who is like a waiver wire pickup coming off the Jags to turning into an All-Pro. Like, in terms of, is there someone who's earned it? He's probably earned it. It's just a matter of, is the number going to be something that we're comfortable with and something he's comfortable with? And I don't necessarily expect that to be the case. But transitioning now to the rookie guys, you are on the ground in Indianapolis, as we've talked about. So if I'm, as I am, I'm a Jets fan. I'm watching the combine this week. You're going to be on, getting firsthand scoopage. What positions, or even if you have them, specific players, should Jets fans be looking towards this weekend?
Yeah, so I covered a little bit of this on TOJ with Will last week, but it was not on the Badlands feed. So I'll kind of go through what I talked through there. I think I've been focusing kind of a little bit later on down in the draft in terms of value, because I think that's something that we really never got in the previous regime. I mean, Michael Carter, the cornerback, was a good later round value. Jason Pinnock could have been, but they let him walk. And so that's kind of the area I've been focusing on. I'm contributing to the Badlands draft guide this year, so I've been trying to kind of focus my energy at I don't want to say the bottom of the barrel, but just kind of like lower down the line, right? Whereas Connor and Meigs and Will kind of be covering all the top guys. And so I've identified a couple areas like, number one, I've made it clear, like, I am not interested in trading up for a quarterback. If something insane happens and Cam Ward slides all the way down to 7, like, sure, then that's a conversation. But until anything credible says that he's sliding down the draft, like, I don't know if that's even worth talking about. And I definitely don't want to trade up for him or Shador. And so I'm looking at like day 2, day 3 quarterbacks that are a little bit further down the line, that to me are worth dart throws, right? And so, like, 3 guys I've identified: Tyler Shuck from Louisville, who's actually gotten a lot of press the last few days. I think a lot of people are starting to kind of like zero in on him. There was one guy, I don't know if it was his agent or somebody, who was saying like, yeah, no, he should be a day 1 quarterback. He could be QB1 in the draft. Like, I don't know if I'd go that far, but Tyler Shuck from Louisville, Curtis Rourke from Indiana, and Donovan Smith from Houston, who may go undrafted if we're being honest. But like my thought there is, I don't really want to go at the top. And if you're not going to go at the top and you're going to try to get something value later on down the line, like, don't pick like Dylan Gabriel, who's 5'10" and had a ton of college success, right? Like, let's try to hit a home run with a guy with insane physical tools, who is smart enough to run an NFL offense. And so, like, kind of like they did with the tight end, Zach Kuntz. Like, hey, it didn't work, but like they took a chance on a physical freak. It cost them almost nothing. And you see what happens, right? And so all 3 of those quarterbacks I outlined there are 6'5". And kind of what I want to zero in on is, out of those 3, which one has the best head for an NFL offense, right? And obviously kind of the publicity is saying that it's Tyler Shuck. And if he's there and it's an advantageous spot for the Jets, sure. But I think either of these 2 other guys would be worth a look too. And Donovan Smith, like I said, might go undrafted. Like, maybe you get him as an undrafted guy to come in and just compete and see what you have there physically. The tight end group, Tyler Warren, obviously, like, I'm interested to see him, right? But if you don't go that route at 7, I think there's other stuff that's valuable down the line. Fannin, I think, is one to look for. I think I just read that Arroyo, the kid from Miami, like right before we hopped on, I read that he's not participating this week due to a knee injury. And so if you're comfortable with the medicals there and he slides a bunch because of that knee injury, then that's a potential value pick where, hey, we're confident that this knee thing isn't anything long term. And because of that, he slid 2 rounds out. Let's take a shot with Arroyo, right? And then the one that I identified with Will the other day is Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. Nothing flashy. He's a lunch pail kind of tight end. Not like super athletic, but he's NFL ready. Like, he's ready to start pretty much day 1. He's a great blocker. He's got insane hands. He catches everything you throw at him. He's a good red zone target. He's a good heavy middle of the field target. That's probably not going to rack up a ton of yak, but like, he'll catch the ball, he'll secure it, and he'll take a hit, and it's all good. And so I'm interested to see what kind of value they can get at tight end. And then I'm almost like, I said I was embarrassed to bring this up on TOJ with Will, and I'm just as embarrassed the second time. But like, it would be really nice to have a good kicker. And, keeping in mind that we drafted Mike Nugent and it didn't work, and then he was pretty good for the Bengals for a while, like, there's a little bit of PTSD associated here. And obviously I'm not talking about any kind of early round pick here, but there's a kid, Ryan Fitzgerald from FSU, who went perfect on field goals and PATs this season. He was 5 for 5 over 50 plus. And like, if he's hanging around like later down the line, 6th, 7th round, and nobody's taken that shot yet, and nobody's gone crazy and picked him, like, hey man, like, why not? Like, if you can get a young guy, if you can get the next preeminent kicker in the NFL, like, why wouldn't you do it at that point? Especially because in that part of the draft, you're throwing darts anyway. So those are kind of the 3 things I've been doing a little bit of work on. And honestly, I'm just like, I'm excited to kind of like get into